Hello and welcome to this online lesson. My name is Mr. Hoven and today we're going to be looking at the Korean War. If you remember from the last few videos, we've been looking at the U.S. early on in the Cold War and focusing on our containment policy in areas of Greece and Turkey with the Truman Doctrine and Western Europe with the Marshall Plan. In last video, we focused a lot on Berlin, the Berlin crisis, the Berlin airlifts. And these have all been ways we try to contain communism without getting involved in a direct conflict. Now, with the Korean War, we are going to show the Soviet Union that we are willing to go to any measures, including the use of military power, in order to contain communism where it is and keep it from spreading. So, let's go ahead and get started. At the end of World War II, the Americans and the Soviets divided the East Asian country of Korea, the Korean Peninsula, at the 38th parallel of latitude. The communists set up a government in North Korea, and a republic was established in South Korea, very similar to that of the United States. On June 25th, 1950, North Korean troops invaded South Korea in an attempt to take over that country. The poorly armed South Koreans were no match for the North, but by September, the communist forces had gained control over much of South Korea, including the capital city of Seoul. Only a small area in the southeast around the port city of Busan was still held by South Korean army. So now it's up to the U.S. Do we get involved or do we stay out of it? So without even consulting Congress, Truman quickly reacts to the invasion and he sends out light, air, and armed forces to South Korea. Truman persuaded the United Nations to send troops. Most of these UN troops were Americans, and they were led by General Douglas MacArthur, who was a World War II hero. He made his landing quickly in Korea and made quick work of the North Koreans, pushing them back beyond the 38th parallel. So the UN and the US are working to contain communism. But now came the time. Should we just stop at the 38th parallel or push on and maybe take over part of North Korea, diminishing communist influence, preventing the domino theory from happening, and securing a new land for a free republic? MacArthur urged Truman to order an invasion of Korea, and Truman gave Newton approval for an invasion of the North to create a unified Korean democracy. As MacArthur advanced closer to the Chinese border, hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops advanced across the border and drove the UN forces back. And within weeks, communists gained control of Seoul again, South Korea's capital. So China was afraid of losing ground in the communism versus capitalism in the democracy race. So they sent their troops over the border and drove the UN forces back. And by January 1951, UN forces had regained control of Seoul and pushed those communists back across the 38th parallel. But now the war was at a stalemate. Neither side was gaining much ground. There was intense fighting along the 38th parallel, but there really wasn't any gain or loss for either side. And this stalemate continued for 2 years. And as the stalemate continued, Truman thought about negotiating an end to the fighting. MacArthur, however, argued that dropping the atomic bombs on the Chinese bases and supply lines would bring a quick victory. Truman opposed MacArthur's plan, fearing it would lead to a larger war with China or develop into another world war. MacArthur publicly criticized the president. In a letter to a member of Congress, MacArthur complained that he was being kept from doing his job. "We must win," he wrote. "There is no substitute for victory." And on April 11th, 1951, President Truman relieves MacArthur of his command. He fires him. He concluded that it was the only action he could take and still be President of the United States. Truman wrote, "If I allowed him to defy the civil authorities in this manner, I myself would be violating my oath to uphold and defend our Constitution." MacArthur's firing created a storm of protest in the United States, and he was welcomed back to America with a hero's welcome. And he delivered his farewell speech before Congress, saying, "Old soldiers never die," he said. "They just fade away." So Peace talks began, the two sides sat down to the peace talks in July of 1951. And finally, a ceasefire was signed in 1953. A DMZ, or demilitarized zone, was set up at the 38th parallel, and there was no clear winner of this conflict. So no one really won the Korean War. It's still kind of going on. And if you think about what's going on currently, it definitely is. But in this instance, the United States had shown the USSR that we were willing to use force to contain communism. Hope you enjoyed this online lesson. Next time we'll be switching gears and looking more at the domestic policies during this time of the Cold War. We'll see you next time.